Coming to you from the greatest city in the world, this is the #1 showbiz podcast. It's Talk for Two. Here's your host, Matt Bailey.
Welcome, everybody, to a very special, more live-to-tape kind of episode of Talk for Two. I'm your host, Matt Bailey, and before we begin, I want to give a shout-out to our season sponsors, Axtel Expressions and the Tangent Bound Network. You can visit them at axtel.com and tangentboundnetwork.com. Now, today, I'm not the only host. I have my good friend here with me, Mr. Chris Ortiz. How are you, Chris?
Hello. I'm doing well. How are you, Matt?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this. This is going to be...
No problem. This is going to be awesome. But first of all, I just have to ask, what made you want to do... You just had your 100th episode not too long ago. What made you want to do this episode?
Okay, well, just for those of you that are just tuning in and just see the title, you see it's called A Look Back. And a reason I wanted to do a look back was because, well, I kind of wanted a synopsis for Talk for Two. I wanted an episode that if people say, "What is Talk for Two?" I could point them in the direction of the of this episode, and they could take a look. Now, the way we handled production ended up kind of being a little funny, isn't it? Right? You kind of handled our little first life. You know what we were called for?
Ventriloquism Weekly.
Yes, Ventriloquism Weekly, which we were called for 70 some odd episodes of our first show. So we've been doing probably about 20 or so. Under this new name. It's crazy.
Awesome.
And then I picked some non-vent clips. I have one vent clip, but I picked from the eclectic mix of other performers that we've had on the show as well. So I like how this works out. What do you think? You think we're going to have fun?
This is going to be awesome, And if you had to describe to someone, Matt, what you do with Talk for Two, how would you describe to someone absolutely new? How would you describe Talk for Two and what your job title is, I guess? Host.
My job title, besides host and producer and hair puller outer, is storyteller.
Storyteller. Okay.
I mean, when we started, we were we are an industry-centered show, but more and more, the most interesting part is not that they come on and dispense advice about how to practice or what they want to see in performers who listen, but how they got to where they are. So whenever I'm crafting questions, in fact, it's funny, I was just writing about this today. Whenever I'm crafting questions, I'm coming up with a way of helping my guest tell their story. So that's the most exciting thing. Now, Let's jump in. Let's get to this.
Alrighty.
We're going to start with the first person that you picked.
Okay.
And of course you picked him.
I had to.
You had to pick.
A very good friend of mine. I had to.
Who'd you pick? Tell him who you picked.
I picked Mr. Terry Fader.
Terry Fader.
Episode 6 interview, I believe.
Yes. Now tell us about the clip you picked.
And the reason I picked it is because I loved what he had to say in this little 5-minute, I guess, section of what I picked. He talks about the quality of putting a show or putting your act together. He talks about quality. And, as performers, we always want, the fancy bells and whistles and what will make us always look good. But really, it just matters on the quality of what you do. You have to find your specialty. And also, he made a good point, even though we may not get famous and have extremely huge success like Jeff Dunham and, himself, but you can always focus on contentment and being the best that you can be. Become better and, keep practicing and get better at what you do. And, if you become a professional vent and you get paid for it, I think that's as good as it gets. And so that's why I kind of picked this clip. Also, he talked about me sucking at the beginning. So, there's that. But I've been practicing and I'm keeping with it. So that's why I picked this clip.
Yeah. I'll tell a story about it after we listen. So here's Terry Fader.
Wonderful.
And this new road show that you do really kind of touches on your journey and talks about how hard work and it really gets you to these places you can just dream of. And so that's why you're an inspiration to so many people, Mr. Fader. That's that your story is an inspiration. And last thing, I know we have about a half hour, was what we planned. So the last question I want to leave with is, what would you like to see from this generation learning the art form as they come up and work as you did?
What I really, really want to see, and what I hope that I am encouraging other people, is quality, because quality will always sell. It's so funny. Here in Vegas, I look around, and people think that spectacle is what people want to see. So they feel like if you don't have a cast of thousands or a cast of 150, and you've got people, swinging on ropes and doing things, and it's like, yeah, that's all great and everything, but every show doesn't have to have that. Bette Midler came out and did this unbelievable show, and she had dozens of people in the cast, and she had these humongous sets. And afterwards, I talked to her, and I said, so, what do you think? She said, oh, my gosh, I can't tell you. I don't ever want to play Vegas again because it was too much work. And I'm sitting there thinking, it's ridiculous, because I would pay to see Bette just stand up there and sing songs, because it's quality. It's to sing songs and tell jokes. Same thing with Elton John. He has all of these gigantic inflatables and humongous, all this stuff going on everywhere. And it's like, all you got to do is get a piano and sing the songs that we all love. It's the same thing. If you're good, people will pay to see you. If you're good, if you do quality material and you're a quality ventriloquist, you will be successful. Now, you may not find the kind of success that myself and Jeff Dunham has. I mean, and look, I realize that I don't understand why it has happened. I mean, I did put a lot of time into it. 32 years of hard work, and, paying my dues, and 25 years of travel on the road, of playing the absolute worst places you can possibly imagine, all over the country. So, yeah, I paid my dues. But a lot of people pay their dues and never actually get this. So it was definitely, the universe kind of came together in a perfect storm of to create what happened to me. Same thing with Jeff Dunham. There's a lot of ventriloquists that are just as talented as him that will never find the success that he has. But at the same time, and it's like I said in my road show, that finding contentment, and if you are able to make a living as a ventriloquist, even if you never find the phenomenal success, if you can find that happiness and contentment, that's really kind of the key. And if you're good, and if you're funny, and if you put quality material out there, you can make a living doing this. And that's what I hope people take from it. I hope people, instead of looking and saying, wow, I want to get rich and famous, I hope people look and say, I want to be the best. I want to be as good as I possibly can be. And if it happens, yay. And if not, man, you can still impress the heck out of people, and you can still make a mark on yours. There was one of the ventriloquists that was there that actually won the Clinton Detweiler Scholarship that my wife and I sponsor every year, is Christopher Ortiz. And he saw me at the Iowa State Fair before I ever won America's Got Talent. And it inspired him to become a ventriloquist. And one of the reasons why he won this year was because when he first started, he was terrible. I mean, I was just looking and saying, this poor kid, I got to see him he did a little show for me. And I'm like, this poor kid. And then when he sent his audition piece for me, I realized that guy has worked his butt off. And he's got funny material, and he's developed a real rapport with his puppet. And his lip movement can use some work, but he's young, and he's improved so much, and that to me is the key. The key is get better, get good at what you do, put out quality material that's funny, and I'm telling you, you will be a success. And that's what I hope. I hope that next generation, when I'm sitting on the couch retired and I'm watching on television and I see that next fantastic ventriloquist and I go, wow, I just would love to know that I somehow had an influence on that person, whoever he or she may be.
I love Terry.
He's a great motivational speaker.
He's great. I got to tell you, I was so scared to do that first episode, and now you were talking about we celebrated our 100th. Now when we Skyped in for that episode with Steve, Terry was on his bed playing video games, and it's like, oh, hi, Terry. How are you doing today?
That's awesome.
So it's fun. But that first one, my word, we had just started 6 episodes in, and we had just, and he said, yeah, I'll do it. And so I didn't have any professional equipment except the microphone, and it's not even the microphone I use now anyway. So I thought, okay, I'd just been plugging my phone into like a beat pill, but like a cheap version of a beat pill.
Okay.
Just like a freebie, something that my mother had won. And I thought Terry needs to be a little clearer than that. So we set up this speaker that this speaker that I use for my gigs that I was telling you about that you should go get. That I tell everybody about, this custom PA50. And it was just this long speaker, and I plugged in my phone like an iPod, which is what I would do with the other speaker. But I plugged it in, and he came through a little clearer. So it was kind of a MacGyver technique.
Nice. I love it.
So next week, next clip, next week, my word.
You're
Next
just
clip.
in podcast mode.
Yeah, next clip. Steve Axtell. Why Steve?
I picked Steve not only because he is a great businessman and great, he founded a fantastic company where a lot of us get our puppets from, but also I enjoyed what he had to talk about here in this 5-minute clip. He talks about how he started his business in a bedroom and worked his way up. It takes a lot of hard work to achieve a dream, and Axtel's best ideas, I believe, he said, comes from thinking about his show or his audience. So you always, as a performer, have to be thinking about your show and be creative. Never let any creative juices out until you're editing and rehearsing the show. Also, his goal in life is to make people happy, and I found that really inspiring because I think, personally, he does make people happy with his products, and you can see that through his company, and he's also very good at his PR in his on social media and other programs. So that's why I picked Steve.
That's great. So how did Axtell Expressions come to be out of your experimenting with latex?
Well, I always was a lot more than latex. So latex just happens to be something that I began with as an inspiration. So it was a way for me to sculpt and to cast and to get a result of something that looked amazing and looked like those masks that I was after, that look. But I was also inventing magic and illusions, and I was in my show at the time, had the bird arm illusion that everybody knows now.
Yeah.
I had that in my show. And so we were in Atascadero, and Susie was going to school. She had just graduated and was working full-time in a sewing industry. And she said to me one afternoon, she said, "Steve, would you like to just stop our full-time jobs and start our business? Like, you could do your shows full-time, and I could help you make puppets." And and I was pretty excited about that. I was like, oh, my wife's suggesting something that I would normally, but I was very responsible and said, well, let's start a business. Let's don't quit our jobs yet. And obviously, we have a lot of work to do before we can replace that income. So we started in the bedroom of our little Atascadero house, and it was just a tiny little 10 by 12 bedroom, and it was my workshop. It was a spare bedroom we had, and I even had a garden hose coming in the window into a bucket, and that was my sink. And and I have all of these really funny little stories of that place. We made messes. The molds would overflow in the mold and get all over the kitchen linoleum, and we just ruined that house with Axtell Expressions. But that was our start. And my first customer was in 1982, Jeff Kozad, who recently came out here to our current studio and visited me just about a month ago. His picture's on our Facebook page.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So, off of that, how has being an entertainer yourself? I mean, there's videos of you using using your products on stage at kid shows and stuff. How has being an entertainer formed what you want to offer to the vent community and to the puppet community, magic community?
Yeah, well, that's I think that's a key to what I do. I'm not just a builder; I'm a user too. And when some of my best ideas come from when I am planning to entertain, whether it's, well, I don't do a lot of that anymore. But if I have a show coming up, a dealer show or a like Mint Haven or Magic convention, that kind of thing, Cadabra. when I'm going to those, that gives me the same kind of mental stimulus as it would be if I was still performing, on stage every week. And so I get these because I know what I want to do to amaze an audience when I step out there, and I've got tricks up my sleeve to pull on them that they've never seen before. And so that starts my invention mode. So I think it benefits entertainers like yourself that you get to have the inspirations from me, who is, probably gifted with invention in terms of entertainment. And I can provide those tools for you guys who are actually doing the performing now. I'm not.
Right.
But my goal in life was to make people happy. And since I can spread that out through all of my customers all around the world, I think it's a lot more than I could have ever done.
And you certainly have made many, many entertainers around the world happy. And how does that feel personally to know you started this years ago and now you're seeing posters everywhere of entertainers that with your products? How does that feel?
Yeah. Oh, man, it feels fantastic. And Facebook is, any social media is tremendous for bringing us all together. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that is super exciting is that I can go, and we haven't started doing this yet, but Susie and I want to travel the world more and manage less. And as we do that, there's not a country in the world that I probably couldn't call someone and connect with that is using our products now or has in the past or will be in the future when we are traveling. It's just all over the map. It's over 80 countries.
Steve is my best friend in this business. He messages me every day. It's funny. Awesome. I used to bug him, and now he'll check in with me at least a couple of times a week. It's wonderful. He's so cool.
I wrote a paper on his company, Axel Expressions, actually, for my PR class last year.
I remember that. Yeah,
and I felt horrible because as my mom read it over the summer, after I turned it in and after it's all been graded and stuff, she's like, "You're actually gonna turn this in to Steve?" And I'm like, "Yeah, why not?" And she's like, "Well, there's a lot of errors in this." And I'm like, but I got an A on the paper, so I mean that's gotta count for something, I hope, and hopefully Steve liked it. So
did you give it to Steve?
I did, yes. We met at this past convention, and I gave it to him, and it was great. I'm sure he was reading it on the plane back, and he was like, "Oh my gosh, this kid cannot write to save for his life." Because you've read some of my papers and have edited them, Matt, and
you're better than you give yourself credit for.
It's a little rocky, but let's continue on.
All right, who's next, Chris?
I picked Mark Wade.
Marky Mark
of ventriloquism. Yes, I noticed he was your first kids show vent on Ventriloquism Weekly. Is that not true?
And this is a source of guilt for me. We focus on so many. Not that we have Mark as the first one. I love that he was the first, but the source of guilt is that we don't have a lot of kids entertainers on the show now, and it has nothing to do with the fact that I'm not a kids performer because I'm a family performer, but I'm not a juggler, and we've had Niels Dunker, and I'm not a balloon person, and we've had Buster and Annie. They're tougher to find. Quality kids performers who, with no disrespect to anybody working the market, who have something to say and have the time to come on and say it. They're tough to find. I have some ideas in my head of other people I want to have on, but I feel guilty because this is an area where I'm kind of underexposed with it. And this was also our first Skype interview.
Oh, wonderful.
And of course, you picked the clip. I don't know if you did this intentionally, but he mentions Garth in this clip.
Well, maybe that had something to do with it. I don't know. But Mark talked about how he used to open for big acts like Reba and Garth for many different performances, and how if you are going to be a kids show vent, you must love kids. I think that's true with any audience. I mean, you must love your audience for what you have to do. And you also have to create kid humor. And I love what he has to say about, there's a difference between childlike and childish. Mm-hmm. And childlike is the more way to go. And it just takes just as much. agreed with his point that he said. He said it takes just as much work as adult shows as it does kid shows, and I couldn't agree more with that. And that is why I picked Mark Waid.
Mark Waid, how are you? Thank you for being with us.
Well, hi, Matt. Good to be with you, too. This is going to be a lot of fun this afternoon.
I'm so excited. We've never had a kid show ventriloquist on who at all, and then all of these awesome projects that you're tacking on top of that after your move to Florida. So we have a ton to cover today, but of course I always want to cover start at the beginning, your journey into ventriloquism.
Oh, my. Well, I just ended my 35th year of performing full-time, being a full-time ventriloquist, traveled across the country, around the world doing shows, and it's been good. I started out as an elementary school teacher before that and taught for 3 or 4 years and then left to go full-time into ventriloquism. It was a good move because I've been busy ever since. Yeah, liked it a lot.
That's great. So, kid show ventriloquism specifically, is that because of being a teacher, or how'd you find that?
Well, actually, it just kind of fell into my lap. Naturally, being inclination toward working with kids anyway, and some people I think have an affinity for working with kids, and kids know if you like them or you don't like them, and they can tell right away I like working with kids and being around kids. And I think that was one of the things that naturally developed. It just appealed to me. I did shows for adults, and I still do shows for adults. And I don't mean X-rated or bad shows. I mean shows, just not children's shows, more sophisticated, I guess, if you want to call it that. But I found out that there was a real need for good quality children's programming for ventriloquists. One of my mentors early on was David Ginn. Mm-hmm. Funny enough, not a ventriloquist, a magician. And he kind of opened the doors up to children's performing for me, and he and I became good close friends over the years. And it just one thing led to another. I was teaching and I was doing shows on the side, and an agent saw me and said, "Hey, I want to use you as an opening act." I said, okay, I have the summer off. I can do that. He said, I got a brand new act I want you to work with over in Virginia. Her name's Reba McEntire.
Wow.
So I was shot over to Virginia. Then after that, the guy called me, the agent said, I got another new act I think you'll like working with. His name's Garth Brooks. So I went out and I worked with Garth Brooks, and all in all, I did the fairs for about 8 years, all the time honing my skills with children and children's performing until then I could leave teaching completely and go into event full-time. The summertime, I did the fairs. The rest of the other 9 months of the year, I did children's performing in schools and libraries, and I got to be get a reputation for doing those kinds of shows. So it's kind of stuck over the years.
Yes, we'll come back to the kid show in just a second, but you brought up all these big-name artists that you opened for. I ever since I found out you've opened for these acts, I've wondered, how did that work, the ventriloquist opening for the Country Music Act? What kind of material did you have to do, and how did a variety act mesh with a music act like that?
In those days, they loved having opening acts. I went out to what's called the Cold House. The audience wasn't warmed up. My job was to work 20 minutes before the big act to get the audience kind of in the right mood, laughing and jovial mood, so that the big act wouldn't have to do all that when they came on. They'd be like, so anyway, that was my job, and it worked out really well. I was a suitcase act, as they call it. I came out with a stand and a suitcase. The light was perfect because it was a big star. They had perfect light, perfect sound with sound guys there. I just had to get in and bring my suitcase in, snap it open, set it up, do my 15, 20 minutes, whatever they needed, and got them laughing and said goodbye and walked off. And then the big act, many times I have to MC the show too. I'd introduce the big act after me, and then it would come on and do it. They always said, you can be good, but don't be better than the big act.
Right, and it's interesting, such a unique and varied career. So let's get back into the kids show stuff.
Sure.
What makes a good kid show performer? What makes a top-notch quality entertainer for children?
Number one, you have to love kids. I mean, really love working for them, love their attitude, love their open and honest opinion of things. One thing about children, if they like you, they tell you. If they don't like you, they still tell you. Some people can't stand that brutal honesty that comes up when you work with children. So they go to the adult clap politely and say that was very good, although they're saying it was probably pretty lousy behind their back. So they don't really get the full story. The kids, boy, it's right out front. If they like you, they tell you. I think that's number one on the list. You have to have an affinity for kids and work with that. Number two is I think you have to have humor and be able to create humor on their level. Now, there's a difference between being childish and being childlike. I think you can be childlike in your humor and the kids respond. But there's nothing worse than seeing somebody trying to be silly and kiddie-like in front of a group of kids, because I don't think they really accept that either. They want you to be on their level, but they don't want you to be a kid. They want you to be the adult. And so there's a fine line you have to walk there. Childish, not childish, but childlike. Like I said, you have to be able to manipulate the puppet, do all the things you do for an adult audience. You have to be able to do it. Just because they're kids, and some not informed ventriloquists say, it's a bunch of kids, it doesn't matter. Go out there, wave the puppet around, get your check, and get out of there. Well, no, it's a whole lot more than that. You know, you have to have a show that's honed, like any adult show would be honed. How to use kids on stage, bring them on stage, and how to get them off the stage in the correct manner, how to use them on stage without making a prop out of the kids. You want them to be part of the fun. So there's a lot of fine points that you have to look at when you're working with children. And it's a wonderful audience. It's been my bread and butter for 35 years, and it's one of the, I sometimes think, neglected ends, the kind of the poor stepchild sometimes of ventriloquism. But we've really made big inroads and made some big things forward with it. So I'm very, very pleased. That's one of my goals, is to put children's performing right up there with the rest of it, and I think it belongs up there.
Yes, because they value quality entertainment for themselves as much as, grown-ups value quality entertainment for themselves. Mark Wade, I just talked to him today.
Did you really?
Yeah, it was funny. I called him. At the time we're recording this, he's getting ready to go in for that surgery. And so my thoughts and prayers are with him. I wanted to give him a call and wish him well. So, yeah, Mark is great. And then you follow Mark with Jay Johnson. This is cool.
Whenever my mom, I don't know if your mom does this, but when your mom gets in public and starts talking about you, she starts mentioning people you know and stuff you do.
Yes.
And so, I mean,
she's talked to Bill Engvall. Mom, shut up.
Exactly. I mean, my mom, whenever we're in public, she talks about, ventriloquism and the convention, which is awesome. And then she talks about, Jeff Dunham is there and Jay Johnson, and she's like, do you remember watching soap as a kid and blah blah blah, and it's always funny that Mom, whenever she gets in public, she doesn't. I don't know if she gets nervous, but she just starts talking me up. Mm-hmm. And I think as a parent, though, God bless her, that's like I think an instinct that all parents have. So
that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I picked.
Go ahead.
I picked Jay Johnson though because he talked about theater and Broadway in a sense together, and theater is based on focusing on the entertainment aspect. And in theaters, when you perform in a theater, you can play and listen with the audience. Unlike a club, if comedy clubs, they just want joke after joke after joke, punch after punch after punch. And I think I have grown a love for theater, and I just find myself in awe being in them because the way they're constructed and made, they're just so beautiful. And he talked about the differences between nightclubs and theaters in this. And also nightclubs have many, many distractions. People go to a theater to sit, watch, stay, and be, entertained. And he gave some tips on doing nightclubs. I'm not sure if I would ever do them, but he gave some good tips as well for those who are interested in doing nightclubs. But I agree with him when he says theaters are fun in the park, and nightclubs are like a dark alley. I liked that quote. But just find the venue that you love and enjoy it. And that's why I picked Jay Johnson.
How have you found through that journey that ventriloquism and theater relate to one another?
Well, any performing in theater relate together, obviously, because that's what, as I said, what theaters are for. So you come there to watch a performance, as opposed to a nightclub, and maybe that's the comparison, I guess, a nightclub and a theater. A nightclub, you have so many distractions. You have waiters and you have waitresses. If they serve food, you've got eating, you've got drinking, you've got people talking, you've got people having a little more to drink than they should and talking loud or speaking loud. A theater, you don't normally have that sort of stuff. So the focus on a theater is extremely focused. Focus is focused. But that allows you to do a lot more things than you can in a situation where you have to kind of ride herd on this animal called an audience. You really have to take a nightclub audience by the horns and really just ride it. But a theater audience, you can play, you can express. They will listen. They're not expecting a joke every 30 seconds like at the club. So ventriloquism is made for that kind of thing because it's combination comedy, illusion, acting, performance, and a lot of those things take somebody observing a little more consciously than they would in an alcohol-infused environment.
Yeah, you can go on more of a journey, as you said, with an audience in a theater as opposed to a nightclub. So I read your blog yesterday. I read it every day. It's hysterical. Yeah, I mean, some of them are, and
sometimes more than others.
Right, but some of the last ones have been so amusing. And this one about them getting up. I want them to go read it, so I'm not going to ask you to tell it, but them getting up, and you think it was a mass exodus because of ventriloquism, but it turned out to be something else entirely. And I plugged your blog at the beginning at the beginning of this, so they know where to go. And so go and read it. But that said, any tips for those that are starting out and starting to do the nightclub? And I'm actually asking a little more for myself, I'll admit, because I'm going into New York and I'm going to be doing that. And I'm sure there are many others who want to do it. So any tips for those doing the nightclubs?
Well, I think the one thing when you walk onto a nightclub stage, I'm all about focus. When I do a corporate event, I want to make sure that the stage is placed where it should be in a banquet hall, and it's focused with the right lights. It's got the attention of the room because there's so many distractions. And what you want to do is try to minimize the distractions first, but also realize that it's a very organic kind of audience. They are there for a different reason than why they come to the theater. So read your audience is what I'm trying to say. Is your timing has to be a little quicker. You have to be a little bit more aware that people are likely to yell out when they're not thinking, and you just have to be. I guess I would compare it. I'm trying to think of a great metaphor. Either walking down theater might be like walking down a park, having a great time, and then nightclub is more like walking down a very dark alley, wondering what's around the corner. You got to be a little more aware, I think.
Yeah, it's certainly. Yeah, that's interesting. An interesting analogy, the nightclub to the theater, and you talk about focus. We get a lot of questions here. And one of the ones I wanted to ask you talked about writing and practicing writing. How do you go about practicing ventriloquism, not on stage, doing a rehearsal process?
Well, it will depend on whether I am just free-forming some stuff that I really don't know where I'm going with. There's nothing particular written, but I have an idea that might go somewhere. And that rehearsal might take the form of me and Bob Darwin, one of the characters that I think would be appropriate for this idea, just kind of sitting down like we are now, kind of talking. And I know you've had the experience of two comics sitting in a room, and pretty soon they're hysterically funny because one feeds off the other. And in some strange universe, that's what happens for me and my characters. We kind of go back and forth and just kind of talk about it. Something may come out of that. So that's one way of rehearsal. Then if you've got a script, you really have to rehearse those words, and sometimes the words might be a problem. You might have to do a little, practice your scales of getting that word the way you want it, that expression. So mainly it's just do it, whichever way you do it. You really have to make the time, practice, make that a goal, set a time, do it, and hopefully enjoy it, because there's a lot of rehearsal compared to performance.
Jay's great, and you talk about friends in this business. I love Jay. Now, listen, I have something to say about this and the way this clip worked before we go on to the next one.
Yeah, for it.
You picked them, but I'm the one who has to edit all of them. So while I was editing these together, because to save time, I cut the clips before we've recorded this. While I was editing it, I thought, I don't ask questions like that anymore. How do you practice? There are some questions I've gotten away from in the interest of getting to people, in the interest of being a storyteller and not just asking, how do you practice? What's your advice? So it's interesting to see how I first started and I'm like, oh, you know what? I might not do that anymore. That's a good question. I may want to get back to asking that. And the other thing about Jay, you mentioned soap. It's a great thing for ventriloquism, but as a film major and as somebody who devours television when he's not doing anything else because I have no social life, soap's place in television history, therefore Jay's place, cannot be understated. And I just want that on record. There would be no The Middle. There would be no Modern Family. There would be none of what we consider your conventional family sitcom today if it were not for soap, because they were the first ones to A, do a large group, and B, tackle subjects like homosexuality and murder and all of these things with this sort of tinge of satire. So there would not be the modern sitcom without soap and without what Jay did. And I don't even want to say contributed to, because it's the sum of all parts. Without what Jay did, there would not be modern television. So that
Couldn't agree more.
contribution can't be understated. And with that, we'll move on to Paul Zerdin. Before I let you talk, I have to ask you. I don't know if you knew this, because I don't know if we talked about this. Paul Zerdin is the last clip you picked. But it has come to my attention that there have been some, we all know that there have been some controversies regarding him and Strassman and Ron Lucas. And actually, he mentioned Strassman in this clip. Steve Axtell told me, and I've confirmed this with my own research, that his appearance on my show is the only place where he talks about them influencing him, with them influencing what he does. And them being him being inspired by them. And that is, I don't want to get into the whole politics of it, but if you go and look up the article, you'll articles about what the issues have been, you'll understand why that's important and pretty cool. Yeah. So why'd you pick Paul?
Why did I pick Paul? I picked this clip because he talks about how technology has, changed ventriloquism. There's apps and stuff out now. There's animatronics with puppets now that happens. And he also talks about the different types of puppets, actually, which sometimes I kind of forget about. I just kind of think a puppet's a puppet. But he talked about traditional versus soft figure. And he actually, I believe, he talks about, or he mentions, he says, he talks about lip control could have something to do with the type of puppet you use. Now, whether or not this is true, I have no idea.
But it seems you have experience. You wrote here in the notes, Grandpa Eugene's easier for you than Steve?
Yes, I've noticed that as I, am recording on my cell phone or I'm in front of a mirror, that when I do my Grandpa Eugene voice, my lips tend to stay closed more rather than if I do Steve's voice, who I'm still playing with, who's my traditional figure that I have. And and that's why I picked Paul Zerdin.
Great.
The Muppets, I just thought you could stand on stage at the Comedy Store or anywhere with a Muppet type character and people won't, they'll give you a chance. They won't boo you off just yet. But if I'd have walked out at that time with an old fashioned doll, it would have made life a lot harder. So that was it just seemed absolutely logical. Having said that, my baby character is an oddballs and orphans creation, and that is a traditional doll, but there's something about it that kind of that doesn't look old fashioned.
Right. And so this idea that soft characters are more modern or more relatable than hard characters to a contemporary audience makes it something that appeals to a broader perspective then. Which is
I think so. I think things are changing now though, because David Strassman, he used the traditional looking doll. I don't know if it was a Tim Selberg figure, but it was I don't know, but anyway, it looked traditional, but his whole spin was kind of taking the piss out of it, and therefore he needed to have a scary looking creation, or something that people kind of that reminded them of the magic movies and the Dead of Night and all that kind of stuff, which is why people I think find them scary. But I like both now. And I'm working on a new idea for a character at the moment. I'm torn between going traditional and going, uber latex.
Yeah, and it's such an interesting thing. Just the material, kind of can inform character. Do you think Sam would have been different had he been a hard figure? Do you think the personality of your character would be different?
Yeah, it's funny how I don't know why. This is going to sound really odd, but my technique, my lip technique, my lip control, to me somehow feels better when operating a traditional vent figure. Now, I have no idea why that would be. That's just me being a bit mental. But when I'm doing my baby character, I feel like my technique is at its best than when I'm doing one of my soft figures like Sam. It's a weird thing. I don't know why that is. I can't tell you why. It feels very, very comfortable. But
I had the same thing. I use a few characters in my show, and when I get to the one I have the longest and most set routine with, this is a bit more second nature. The lip control is just a bit more second nature to me. So that makes total sense. And but in terms of actual character of Sam, the look of Sam being that Muppety look, do you think he'd have a different personality if he were a hard figure?
yeah, possibly, yeah, because you've got, I was very, very, very influenced by the Muppet characters and the way their personalities, and so there was a lot of character stuff just that came automatically, just with having a big mouth. So you've got the instant laughter, you've got something laughing, and that gives it some attitude. And then you've got the way there's lots of double takes and things that go on with a big head, which you couldn't get quite the same with a traditional head. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's definitely, it's influenced it, and it would have been very different, I'm sure. I don't know. It'd be interesting to see. It's quite a nice idea actually about him regressing and going back to what he was or what he could have been in another life or something. I don't know. It's just I find that quite interesting.
Alrighty, Matt. I shared my top 5. Well, now you have to share.
Oh, all right. I will share.
Your first guess that you picked.
Scott Land.
Interesting.
Very interesting.
Why'd you pick this clip?
Well, Scott talks about working on Team America, and I asked him about what it meant for him artistically, and it's interesting because Team America had a resurgence after a little movie called The Interview with Seth Rogen and James Franco came out. Everybody was going, yeah, but Team America, because North Korea hacked Sony and all of that stuff. So they enjoyed kind of a resurgence, and that made me think of this clip. And really, with Scott's interview, he's one of these rare interviews where you just throw a dart, and it sticks, and anywhere you land, what he has to say will be good. He doesn't hold back. Anybody that follows him on social media, him and Lisa, they just go for it, and they're really, really cool people. And I asked about, like I said, what being the lead puppeteer on a marionette-based movie meant, and he also talks about the politics of him being the lead puppeteer. He says in this clip that he wasn't paid any more than the rest of the puppeteers, but everybody was still pissed, but they didn't practice. So it's interesting to hear. It was a risk, he said, an artistic risk, and it's just really cool because it's very, very rare that you take political risks with puppetry. So without further blah, 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 here's Scott Land. talking about bringing it to this modern audience, and you did that in a big way with Team America. So can you talk about that experience and what it did for you artistically, what you learned from it, and what you hope the public learned about marionettes and puppetry?
Yes. When they came up with the design, Matt and Trey, they didn't understand anything about marionette puppetry, but they knew that it was funny. Marionettes could be funny. So when they wrote the show, and then when we started shooting, I was just hired as a member of Screen Actors Guild as one of the puppeteers. And within the third day of shooting, Trey Parker pulled me aside, and he said, I look in the monitor and I'm watching you work, and you're far better than the other puppeteers. Why is that? And I said, well, I've been doing marionettes since I was 10 years old. I do it almost every day. This is what I do. And they said, yeah, but these other guys we hired, they're professional puppeteers. They work for the Muppets and those guys. I said, no, those are hand puppets. And he goes, oh my God, we're screwed. I go, no, it's your film. You can do whatever you want. So what he did is he said, I'm going to make you the lead puppeteer and put you in every scene. So literally, whenever there's a single puppet, I'm generally manipulating it as the marionette. And then in group scenes, I'm doing the main characters. So I did all of Kim Jong-il, all of Spotswood, most of Gary, parts of Lisa. But if you added all the scenes, I did about 60-70% of the marionette manipulation in the film. Now, that was beautiful because he was open to that idea. The other puppeteers didn't think that that was fair. Well, the bottom line is all those marionettes were hanging there, and they could have easily picked them up and practiced and got better with their technique. They didn't do that. So that as I would do my scene, I'd finish it, then they say, we're set up for the next scene, now you're going to work this character. They just held on to me. I was being paid the same money as those actors, puppeteers from SAG that were watching the monitor, and they complained. Well, that's show business. That's how it is. And the producer director is the bottom line, and they call who they want to do the scene. So that's why I ended up working so much. Now, after the film came out, it was so early with the war that people weren't sure if we should be joking about this. You know, is this something that we should be satirizing?
Right.
And Matt and Trey also take shots at Hollywood. That's also difficult for a feature film from Paramount to produce. You know, how do we goof on our own people? And that's the beauty of Matt and Trey and South Park, and now them doing the musical The Book of Mormon. They go after everyone. They don't stop. That's the genius of contemporary comedy. You don't have a line that you won't cross. You cross every line if you want to engage with that audience. So people saw the film and were amazed about how the marionettes and what they did and how they were able to create it, make these things that they never thought puppets could do. Then I had friends of mine that were older that were offended by the film. And I said, that is amazing that a puppet show offended you. And that's the modern times. The point of South Park, the point of their point of humor is to offend, to push it to the point where it's offensive. But the bottom line is, it's entertainment, and it's just a puppet show. It shouldn't be taken serious. It's just for fun. And if you go back and you look at Archie Bunker and All in the Family, same design. Let's push it to the point where it's offensive to make the point. And that's what they did. So Norman Lear came on the set and hung out. John Landis came and hung out. All these people were hanging on every word of Matt and Trey. And that was an amazing thing to see because, again, I never thought I would experience that. The amount of people that would come in just to hang out with these two contemporary humorists was remarkable. And when you think about it, they got $32 million to create and produce Team America. It took over 9 months to just build the sets and all the props. They would never spend that kind of money on a puppet film. Not even the Muppets get that kind of a budget. Mm-hmm. So they proved their point. They made back. Paramount did fine, and now it's a cult film. And people will recite and talk about it. Every 4th of July, they'll put it on the television and watch it. And again, puppetry that is not for children. That film obviously is not for kids. But I'll tell you, the fan base is intense. And when people find out that I had worked on it, they want to come up and ask lots and lots of specific questions. So for me, it was the best feather in my cap that I could have ever gotten.
Scotland, everybody. Now I have to ask Matt. This
Yeah.
is when you were starting this podcast, also previously known as Ventriloquism Weekly. At the time, did you ever think, as a podcast host, would you ever interview people beyond, or no people beyond known as vents? Like, did you ever think you'd be interviewing, a marionette user or a magician or
Well, I
other
knew I'd
comedians?
have to throw in a variety of people sooner. I knew I'd have to drive down Main Street a little bit. Because if you take a look at the early episodes, if we differ from Vent, we differ in avenues that still directly connect. Like, I think our first magician was Mike Bent. And Mike, I knew about him because he asked to join the group for my podcast, and then we met. There's a convention in Kutztown, Pennsylvania every year. In 2013, we ended up meeting at this convention. And I knew him because he was starting Vent. He was just starting to do Vent with some Axtel figures. So he stayed connected. And it wasn't until, and let me see if I could pull it up. I have a playlist of all the episodes in order here. So now you have me curious.
All right.
It wasn't until somewhere around around this 50th episode where we did Scott that I got interested in really, really, really branching off, or this 56th episode, because even Scott stayed connected to the Vent world. He builds Vent figures, and it's still puppetry. But Tom Mullica was really the first who didn't have any connection. He just knew Michael Knight, who I'd interviewed, and Michael said, "Do you want to do Tom Mullica?" I said, "Yeah." And
Speaking of Tom Mullica, that's your next person, is it not?
Yes. Now, he's a magician, and he's a Red Skelton tribute artist. He performed in Branson for many, many years, and he's known for his act Nicotine Nincompoop, where he eats cigarettes. It's the coolest. It's the coolest thing.
One question that I had for you is, Tom talks about performers making more money than others, and I just have to ask you, Matt, why do you think less talented people are making more money than others who are extremely talented? There's so many TV shows like Honey Boo Boo and Kardashians, et cetera, et cetera. How does that make you feel?
I wish I knew.
Yeah.
Because, and it fascinates me because on one hand, I get extremely pissed off when the thing that's trending is Khloe Kardashian has taken a new selfie.
Yeah.
Literally, that will trend. Khloe Kardashian posts a picture to Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
Lips are fatter than usual. Like, I don't understand
You're like,
that.
why? Yeah.
But at the same time, they're real 3, 4, 5-dimensional people like you and me. So they get exposed to this attention. They get the positive attention, but they get the negative attention too, and that must make them feel like crap. And so I'm aware of that they didn't ask for this life; it kind of happened to them. But I'd like to know how it happened. I still don't understand our fascination with that culture yet, because there was a time where we valued you were famous because you had talent, and we valued talent over what selfie you posted. So I'm still trying to figure that one out. And as somebody who's fallen in love with media, I love that as a topic of research and exploration.
Interesting.
Here's Tom Mullica. It's a shame. What has happened to the respect? You've obviously watched it wane. Why is it waning? What about our mentality?
Because of our lifestyle. It's too fast. The social media. The whole world is interested in what everybody else is doing. I could care less. I just want to make a living, and I just want to do my thing. Well, you're going to be left behind if you stay out of the social media and stuff. And as I get older, I don't even want to be part of it. It's nothing I'm interested in. I don't care what other people are doing, and I don't want them to know what time I brushed my teeth or where I went today, what I bought today. I don't want selfie pictures. It's just, to me, it's all crazy. I'd rather I've been working on a new act for 2 years. I just found out today I'm going to do it in England in
cool.
less than a month. I'm going to be doing it in England in less than a month from now. And I just got an email from the guy, and he said, well, the venue where you were going to perform, they don't allow any open flame, smoke or flash paper, anything. Well, my whole act is around smoking, so I'm obviously not going to get that. I don't know what's going to happen, but just a situation like that. Years ago, every theater was smoking. When I started the Red Skelton Tribute Show, there were dinner theaters around the country. There are very, very few dinner theaters because of the recession we had, when all these people and these poor people were losing their money, and they can hardly feed their families, and they don't have health care. How do you expect them to go pay $50 to go see a show? They don't do it. They haven't got the money.
Right.
Show business is going. I know acts in Las Vegas that are working for a tenth of the money they used to because they're trying to pay their rent.
Mm-hmm.
It's absolutely crazy, and television is making it worse and worse and worse.
Under the guise of helping it, right? It likes to make the public think it's helping live entertainment, but it's really hurting it.
No, it's all about money.
Right.
They don't care. They don't care about that. They just want high ratings, and they want a popular show, like the Kardashians and all this stuff. It's like, I just don't believe it. I don't understand how someone with no talent can make so much money. And I know a lot of talented people, and they're not working. They haven't worked in years. It's sad. It's like when the vaudeville quit.
Right.
Vaudeville went from the mid-1800s to the early 1900s. There were hundreds and thousands of acts, the greatest acts in the world. They were played all over. Well, once they went on television and everybody saw them all at once, they had no place to work, and they all disappeared.
I'll tell you what, Tom scared me. Tom frightened me. I almost didn't air him. Sorry, Tom, I love you, but
why did it make you so scared?
Just he was the first to really, I don't want to say go negative, but go reality and say, no, this is how I feel. This is a problem. Like you asked that question about, why are people famous for being famous and not talent? That's a real beef that Tom had. But that was the note he played for our interview. So I'm like, oh my word. But it was very well received. And I learned a very important lesson there, that sometimes when people come on and aren't just a different story, but are a different perspective, that's just as valid. And so I love Tom. I love what he did. And speaking of controversial.
Whoa, my goodness. You picked your interview with Williams and Rhee.
The Indian and the white guy. And this is the longest clip of the thing. It's about 8 minutes long. From beginning to end, it illustrates a point. Now, it was the first time I ever had to bleep anybody.
Well, I have to ask, Matt,
yeah.
What did you think of adding your first beep to your podcast?
I thought, okay. I knew it was going to happen. I knew there would be people that would come on and not understand that. Not that they didn't understand it was Bruce who forgot to tell Terry to not swear. But as soon as Terry swore, all bets were off.
And it happened so quick, too. I was listening to the clip, and it was like, oh, well, there it is.
Well, that's also how I cut it. That's also how I cut it. Because... And it's important because Williams and Rhee, they're a politically incorrect comedy duo. Their little handle is the Indian and the white guy. And Bruce makes fun of Terry for being a Sioux Indian, and they just have this great dynamic. And it's funny because they'll push the envelope, but they don't mean offense, and it proves the point. I mean, in this clip alone, you have a gay joke, you have a Muslim joke, and they talk about their point of view while they make it about comedy. And that's why I was excited when they cursed, because it was like this just proves the point. And again, it was well received because they proved their point while they were talking about it. At the end of the clip, and I don't think I'm spoiling it because I think it's funny, I said to Terry, is there a line you won't cross with humor? And I meant it sincerely. I mean, is there something you think about that you want? But Terry, from the back of the room, because it was 3 people on the phone, he goes, we don't say, I was like, okay. But that proved his point, and while he was explaining it at the same time. So here's Williams and Rhee with Dana Williams from Diamond Rio. The thing that I love about you guys is you have an incredible dynamic, and you're not politically correct at all. And that's kind of been in the headlines recently with some comments Jerry Seinfeld has made about playing certain venues and having to be too PC. What are your thoughts about comedy and political correctness and what's happening to it?
I'm sick of this shit. I think you should be able to say whatever you want, the way you feel, the way however you. I say a lot of things I don't really feel that way, but I say them because it's funny.
Yeah,
and it's funny. They're like sitting ducks. I mean, like Donald Trump. I just was telling these guys, Letterman did a thing in Texas with Steve Martin and Martin Short.
Yes, I saw that.
Biggest mistake he ever made was retiring before Donald Trump announced.
Yeah.
So I mean, you got to say things that are funny. And
yeah, comedy has no bounds. Otherwise, it's tragedy.
Yeah.
Me being Sioux Indian, the ethnic thing is wide open. I don't care. I still call a Negro a Negro.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I still call an Indian an Indian. And in some parts of the country, they don't like being called Indians. They want to be called Native Americans.
And we work Canada, and they want to be. They don't call them Indian. Don't call them.
First Nation.
First Nation.
Yeah.
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 So
that's too politically correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's absurd. How do you think we're going to get away from it? I mean, it's tightening in so much and restricting so much of the art of creating comedy. How do we get away from it? What do you think?
I think we just continue to let the gay writers at ABC write the gay until everybody gets sick of that.
Yeah.
Just my opinion.
Yeah. We're all in this world together and stuff, and we have no political affiliations. We just talk about anybody and everybody. We don't hate anybody. We're certainly not going to get some automatic weapons and go in and shoot up people.
That's right. I think anytime anyone is offended by anything that we say, we pull a Muslim out of the crowd and shoot him.
Oh, great. Okay.
Saddam Hussein ran this country a long time like that.
Yeah.
We got to start doing that here. I see Obama goes over, drags out McCain, shoots him.
Oh, God.
And life goes on.
And your one listener just dropped out.
Yeah. That's right. But, okay, well, you two are laughing up a storm. Let's switch to Dana, and from the producer's side of it, what do you think? I mean, you produce all these podcasts, with Terry and with Bruce and all these different media things. What's happening with the censorship?
Man, in my opinion, the censorship is, I don't know. You know what? That's such a interesting subject because censorship is.
He is so politically correct.
He's not politically correct, but it just, the censorship makes me sick in that there's so much that you miss. That's the biggest reason I enjoy us doing this podcast because there is no censorship.
No. No, there's not. It's great. But it makes me curious, I want to go to Terry for this one. When did you decide, okay, we're going to go there? I'm a Sioux Indian and we're going to go with that humor. I mean, it had to be
opinions.
What?
These opinions are let out, and you know what? Everybody's allowed to have one.
Yeah.
But for some reason or other in this country, it's come to a point where I'm not so sure we're allowed to have opinions any longer.
We were all allowed our opinions, including Charlie Daniels. Brett, may he rest in peace. Oh, he's not.
No, he's not. No.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, but back to the question, Terry. Going back to the formation of you two of you and Bruce as a duo, what was that conversation about? Okay, this is the shtick. Me being an Indian and you being a white guy. That's the shtick, and we're just going to go as far as it can go and not worry about being politically correct. What was that conversation?
It was never a conversation. We just did it, and I was known as the Indian.
Yeah,
and so when we started, I had a combo. It was Terry Reed combo, and they would call me the Big Indian, and that's how it got started. So when he got to school, when we met in college, the Indian thing was my nickname, and so he just went from there and would do his plain, ordinary, non-politically correct Indian humor. And then when in my trio that I had a drummer and a bass player, and the bass player was my choir teacher in high school, and he was not a very good bass player. So when I started performing with Bruce could harmonize and made me sound really good. So I got rid of the bass player and hired Bruce. And then in between the songs, singing and dancing, people would dance. I would just usually tell a joke or just pick somebody out in the crowd and start talking about them, and Bruce would just make it funny.
Yeah.
And when we played music and stuff, we found that we didn't know enough songs to do multiple sets without repeating songs.
Yeah.
So we'd fill with banter, and Terry would tell jokes, and then we got booked in a few showrooms where we were required to have an actual show, and a friend of ours helped set it up so that we did song, and then joke, and then song, chaser, and sort of helped set it up in a show format where we were not only playing songs but telling jokes as well. And that's where it all kind of gelled. We knew we had to fill time, and then we knew we had to be funny at this particular moment. So that's when we started reaching out to the parameters to get people to laugh.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's really cool, and I love what you guys do with it now, and where you go with it. Is there a line with the comedy that you won't cross?
We don't say and that's about it. But I personally use a lot in my life.
Yeah, yes, he does. You're going to have to spend about 3 days editing this.
I still laugh every time I think about it.
Wonderful
Every time I hear
interview.
Let's get away from the
switching gears now. You picked Lance Burton for your next one. Why? What was the number one thing that you took away from this interview, Matt? As a magician,
he talks about starting this clip. He talks about starting an illusion show, and he talks about the best piece of advice he'd ever gotten for starting an illusion show. And with some projects I'm working on now in my own performing world, it's solid advice, and I'm actually glad I cut it so I can just go back to this little piece and listen to it.
Yeah.
The best advice I ever got, I got from a man named George Gobel, who's a terrific magician from, I think, Baltimore, Maryland. And I met him at the first magic convention I'd ever attended. It was the IBM convention in Evansville, Indiana in 1976. And I was 16 years old. And he did a full evening show at the convention. And I got a chance to meet him and talk to him. He gave me some advice that was great for doing an illusion show. I was interested in doing a full show even back then when I was a teenager. He said, number one, paint your cases red. That way you won't lose them. So no matter where you go, if you're on a plane or you're on a boat, you know, when you get off, you say, go down there to the hold and bring up those 35 red crates. And you won't lose. So I always have my road cases red.
Yeah.
And the second piece of advice he gave me was, don't try to put a whole show together all at once. Pick one illusion that you can do in your show and work on that, put it in your show, and perform it, break it in.
Mm-hmm.
And do that for several months. And then work on a second illusion and rehearse that and put that in the show. And do it over a period of time. And I think anyone out there who's looking to put together, that wants to do a full evening show, that's the greatest advice anybody could give you. Because I see a lot of the guys over the years who've attempted to put together a full evening show, and that's the classic mistake. Is I'm going to go out and find an investor, and I'm going to build 25 illusions, and we're going to rehearse them. We're going to open the whole show, and that's really the wrong way to go about it. I think George Gobel's advice was correct, and that's the way I always tried to do it, one illusion at a time. One illusion at a time. Do you remember what the first one was? Let's see. Over the years, back when we were in college, Matt King and I were working summers down at a little theme park.
Oh, cool.
Called Tombstone Junction. Even back then, I did my act and he did his act, and then we did a thing together. It was a thing with costumes and a transposition between the two of us. So that was probably our first experiment in illusions. And then when I moved out west, the first thing I put in my act, after I come out to Las Vegas, kind of established myself as a review show act with the Doves. The first thing I put in was the sword fight.
Oh, wow.
The card sword, and then the sword fight with the transposition.
That's really cool. Yeah, that's awesome. Now, I want to ask, when you are creating something, when you are putting an effect together, and I want to use an example I saw on YouTube. You're multiplying bottles. Okay, let's talk about that. When you're creating something, how do you decide what avenue you're going to take with it? I mean, I've seen that. I mean, you get laughs from it, but I've also seen it played for extreme comedy. But I think more with you, it's classy. You have Sinatra going with it. How do you decide what approach you're going to take to the presentation of an effect?
Well, that's a great question, and I don't have a good answer for you, because every routine that you've ever seen me do has all come about through a different procedure.
Mm-hmm.
Now, for the bottle trick, multiplying bottles, that's basically the Ken Brook routine.
Mm-hmm.
And my friend from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, David Seebach, gave me the permission to do the thing with the handkerchiefs tied on the bottles. I had seen him do that years ago. But the way the routine came about was this, and here's an example of a routine coming about through a very odd way. I was reading a biography on Frank Sinatra, and I was just reading it, for pleasure, just because I was interested. And it was he lived a very exciting life and a very interesting life, and he was, a supremely talented entertainer.
Yes.
And there was a passage in the book where here's Sinatra, the guy people consider the greatest entertainer of the century, voted best singer for decades, Academy Award-winning actor, millions and millions of record sales, the girls swooning over him. So you have Sinatra, all these great things he's accomplished in his life.
Pinnacle entertainer.
Yet, there was a passage in the book that Sinatra referred to himself as a saloon singer. And that just really struck me. And I thought, wow, that is really that is really fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
of all the
Academy
things.
Award winner. You know, million selling recording artist, but he doesn't call himself an Academy Award winning artist. He calls himself a saloon singer. Now that's cool.
That is.
And so that's how the routine started.
Lance Burton, ladies and gentlemen, Matt, that was a good choice.
That broke the internet when I said that he was going to do it. People were like, "What?" I was like, "I don't know." He came on,
just happened.
talk about his movie Billy Toppet, so that was really cool.
Very, very nice. And the last person you picked, which I couldn't agree more. You picked the legend Jimmy Nelson for your fifth top fifth. Yeah, you know what I mean.
Jimmy Nelson.
What was it like to interview the legend? And were you nervous at all?
Normally, I read other interviews or I watch other interviews. I didn't do that with him because my reservation with interviewing him, and this is why we didn't have him on sooner, and I guess timing is paramount to anything because he was the perfect guest for number 100. Mm-hmm. The thing is, he'd been interviewed so many times. Yeah. What could I ask him that's a story he hasn't told before? Because the thing I hate as a host is to make people tell stories they've told before. Mm-hmm. I always want to be different. And
Absolutely.
It was Brian Simon who said, you need to interview Jimmy and you need to ask him about Betty.
Ah, okay.
I said, you are perfect. So that's what this clip is. I asked him very simply, and I want everybody to go listen to episode 100 to have a little bit more context, because if Williams and Rhee was an 8-minute clip and Lance was a 6-minute clip, this is a 1-minute clip. And in it, I say, Jimmy, how did you know you were in love with Betty? And his answer is one of the best answers we've ever had on the show. I got to ask, because I'm an old sap over here. When did you fall in love? When did you know you were in love with your touring partner and this very special woman to you?
Oh, that's a question that, of course, is very hard to answer. When you work with a person day and night, we would have rehearsals during the day. We would perform at night and go out for something to eat after the show, that type of thing, where you're not even thinking of falling in love. It just happens.
Yeah.
And it happened, and we have been married now for 57 years.
That's lovely.
Well, they said it wouldn't last.
Hey.
Show business marriages don't last.
So what do you attribute to your longevity? Is it that you always work together all these years?
Oh, my wife's patience. That's what holds us all together.
And that is Jimmy Nelson for you, ladies and gentlemen. And beautiful, beautiful clip, Matt.
Jimmy is Jimmy. I love Jimmy. I love you, Chris. You're awesome.
Thank you.
This is fun. Where can people listen to you? You're a broadcaster too. You've been bit by this.
Maybe a little bit. I don't know. I still have a lot to learn, and I'm still very open to anything. So
no, tell them about K-Buzz. Come on, plug your radio shows.
Okay. Well, as a freshman last year at Graceland University here in Lamoni, Iowa, I started for my work study. I was hired as a radio DJ, and so I'm currently still a radio DJ for K-Buzz Radio. You can visit online there, radio.graceland.edu. And Graceland, just like, Elvis's house, Graceland, GRACELAND.edu. And I work Monday, Wednesdays, Fridays, 10 to 11, Sunday nights, 6 to 8 p.m., 6 p.m. to 8 p.m., and
that's Central American time for those.
Central American time, yes. Thank you, Matt. And Tuesday and Thursday, 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. That's probably my least favorite shift. However, I'm in the talks with someone else, and some people actually co-host here.
You're in talks with somebody else, so you don't have to get out of bed. Good.
No. Because Well, the whole schedule just needs fixing too. But I'm talking to a girl that goes here who's also a radio DJ, and she hates her co-host, and so hopefully she doesn't listen to this, or he doesn't listen to this. But she thinks I'm fun, and I think she's fun, and I think it'd be a whole lot better broadcast with the two of us. We did a little test run actually last week at like 10 o'clock at night, and we just could not stop talking. we used K-Buzz is supposed to play frequently, a lot of music, and do little spots here and there, and we just kept talking, and it was awesome, and it was great. And thanks to K-Buzz Radio, it gave me a chance to interview Terry once again.
And that's on YouTube
for the first time. It is on YouTube, yes. Just type in, I think, a night with Terry, or an evening with Terry Fader. That's what it's called. And I recorded that. And you want to tell the story about that, Matt?
Yeah, okay. So here's the thing. He'd been talking about this. And I said,
Keep in mind, their interview was on April Fool's Day, so a lot of people didn't even believe that I was interviewing a Las Vegas headliner to begin with.
Right.
But okay, continue.
So he's talking about this, doing this interview. And I said, okay, well, I'll skip class and I'll use my podcasting equipment to come and get you a professional quality recording of
Such a good friend.
Of the of your broadcast with Terry, because the way this works is I have a board, and the board has an RCA jack, like a headphone jack, and it plugs into the computer and it records directly what it's hearing. So I thought that's great. I'll be recording the broadcast. Well, Christopher, when he's recording with Terry, places his cell phone voice recorder next to in between him and the phone that Terry's on, and he gets a better quality recording than was actually broadcast on K-Buzz Radio. So technology will never cease to amaze me.
But that just shows how much of a devoted friend you are, Matt, and thank you for skipping that one class for me.
Oh, it was science. I hated it. I had no problem.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. But really, I appreciate all you do for me. I mean, you've edited papers and you've pulled strings for me here and there. So
hey, I appreciate all you did for me. Half the reason I asked you to do this was so that I could unload half the production onto somebody else.
There you go.
But, no, thank you for everything. And I'll quick tell people this seems to be the perfect place to do this. Speaking of college radio, I have been for a while, but I'm on the board of WPUB, W Pace University Broadcasting, WPUB.org, our university radio. And every Thursday from 6 to 7, I'm supposed to have a radio show, but I've decided to do this, meaning interviews, but instead of entertainers, it's with professors and students and maybe the occasional entertainer coming to the Schimmel. I have to work on some of that. We have the Schimmel Art Center where they film inside the actor's studio. So I've decided that quality over quantity. Just like with the beginning of this podcast, I've not built up, just like when I started with this, I don't have a lot of interviews built up because I have to work around professors' schedules. So it's more of a special event thing. It's Thursdays 6 to 7 when I have an interview to air, because I'm not going to come in and just disc jockey music. I really want to work on bringing quality interviews to the university radio. So very excited about it.
And it's obviously a huge talent of yours to interview people and to get it recorded, and the editing as well. You just do awesome. Well, and I'm so proud of you.
I'm proud of you too.
And this broadcast and all you've turned it out to be. So,
well, thank you. Thank you so much. Chris Ortiz, I want you to do the sign off.
Oh man, no pressure. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been the top 10 pick from Chris Ortiz and Matt Bailey. This is Chris Ortiz signing off, reminding all your people. That's not the sign off. What's the sign off? Did you change it or is it still the same?
Reminding everyone out there
to keep talking for two.
You can hear more show business interviews with the stars at talkfor2.com, where you'll also find one-of-a-kind products to improve your own show. That's talk, the number 4, TWO.com.